so people are upset that they feel it's just too political and they just want the football?
Yeah, I mean, it's boring is the problem with it, and they're being lectured to, aren't they? I mean, the one that got my go, and I think got some of my constituents go, was the other day when they broke up the half-time coverage to talk about the environment and climate change, etc. Obviously a very serious issue, but I watched the news for that. I don't watch the football. And it was a very strange 3-minute section that was presented with all these sort of facts, supposed facts, where they said things like, we think, you notice the word we think, that's good journalism, isn't it? We think that there are 10 million qubits for in terms of emissions for the World Cup instead of the 3.5 million claimed by FIFA. It was a very strange sort of one-sided, entirely sort of out of kilter, and really, frankly, I think people just want the BBC to get on with showing the football rather than, frankly, giving them a lecture.
And the other thing is, of course, it's the football pundits who are doing this political lecture.
Oh, yeah.
And Gary Lineker's always said that he shouldn't be subject to the BBC's impartiality rules on Twitter because he's a sports presenter and a sports commentator, not a political journalist. So does this mean now that Gary Lineker will finally be subject to the same impartiality rules as every other BBC journalist, given that he's now openly ventured into the world of politics?
I don't think so. I think basically Gary Lineker writes his own rules. And, you know, when the chair of the BBC, the Director General of the BBC said that he needed to pull his horns in, he just made fun of him, frankly. I mean, I do wonder about this. I mean, the thing is with Gary Lineker, I mean, they go on about the environment and Gary Lineker. Well, how much carbon offsetting is sort of done by the BBC for all the hot air emitting from Gary Lineker on political issues? You know, he loves to venture off on all sorts of areas, often in a very, well, from my perspective, a very ill-informed, woke viewpoint, when actually the truth of the matter is that he's paid to present football matches, and maybe perhaps he and some of his other colleagues will just stick to it.
Why do you think they didn't show the opening ceremony of the Football World Cup, Julian? I mean, and instead decided to do this sort of political pontificating. I mean, what I don't understand is even if they'd wanted to do the political pontificating, they could have come on air half an hour before the opening ceremony started and done that, and still shown the opening ceremony. I don't understand why they didn't show the opening.
And it's not just you that. We've been asked that by our viewers. We've been asked that by football fans.
And
this is part of the celebration. They put, you know, millions, in fact, billions of pounds into this.
I mean, they got the contract. Shouldn't they be showing the opening ceremony, what the people might want to see?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, I do. I mean, you know, I could have a slightly jaundiced viewpoint with the opening ceremony. The only decent one was the one that we did before the Olympics in 2012. I mean, they're normally mind-numbingly dull, but yeah, I suppose that is the case, that instead of doing the opening ceremony, they decided to do a half-hour, you know, sort of political, every sort of trot around. Well, you know, if they've got such a worry about the environment, then how many emissions were used by BBC presenters and reporters getting out to Qatar? I presume they didn't walk. So what are they doing about it? How are they actually sort of doing their bit, so to speak, rather, frankly, than wagging their finger at the rest of us?
I think what lots of people question as well is the sort of double standards here, that they're sticking the boot into Qatar over, you know, issues like LGBT and things like that. But nobody can recall them doing it when Russia hosted the World Cup 4 years previously, and they just, I think, invaded Crimea at the time. And obviously they don't have a great record on LGBT issues. And
how about China with the Olympics?
We've got China with the Olympics. We've also got the next World Cup in America, where obviously there's a controversy over abortion and they have the death penalty. I mean, are we going to now have this at every single World Cup, that the BBC are going to highlight all the things that they don't happen to like politically in that country? Or is Qatar a special case?
Well, it's a bit of a sort of, dare I say, open goal for them, isn't it, to a degree? I mean, you know, Qatar's certainly not the worst of the countries in that particular part of the world when it comes to these issues, although, you know, obviously they do have a lot to be thoughtful about in these areas. But I think that frankly, I think the thing for me, just as, frankly, a football fan and, you know, who wants to actually watch sport and pays their licence fee, is the fact that I actually want to see that rather than frankly, an episode of Panorama. And there's an important point here, is the way in which the BBC tends to drift off. And it's such a big organisation with so many different parts to it that there doesn't seem a monitoring of actual output. generally. So you end up with these sort of like flights of fancy that go on from different departments, and they sort of meet around their water coolers with their copies of The Guardian and sort of decide that, oh, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. And there doesn't seem to be, hang on a minute, this is actually for news journalists. This is for people who are expert in the area maybe to look at, rather than, frankly, someone who's come in 5 minutes before and really perhaps doesn't understand the issues in the round. And I think that's a real issue with the BBC, that almost they're too big and they're trying to do too much.